Yeah, welcome everybody. Marijuana Times show for January 29th, 2018. I am Joe Klare. Welcome to everyone. Checking out our videos. Check out the videos and stories. You can find all these shows at marijuanatimes.org. Also, of course, you can find the Marijuana Times show by searching the Marijuana Times on Facebook and on YouTube. And of course, the audio version of the show can be found on Apple Podcasts. Search the Marijuana Times on there. You'll find the audio show for the people on the go, or the people who just don't feel like looking at me, and the stories and the graphics and the videos and stuff. They play on the show. That's fine. You know what? I don't look at me either, but I'm forced to because I'm right there on the screen. No, I think I'm doing pretty good. Not bad. I could be a little bit better with my shaving, but I've never been great with that, and I'm not going to change. I'm remaining true to who I am for the Marijuana Times show. Stories today we're talking about. Over on marijuanatimes.org, I wrote a story about marijuana taxes in California. We'll also talk about an infographic that has a lot of data about cannabis and the cannabis industry, and also the medical marijuana community and movement lost a pioneer last week. Talk about all of that and more coming up. But first, of course, I want to tell you the Marijuana Times show is brought to you by NatureSideCannabis.com, all natural and organic pesticides. If you're a cannabis cultivator, and many of you who listen to this show are cannabis cultivators, you know that you can't use pesticides in your products. You don't want to use pesticides in your products, first of all, because you don't want harmful chemicals in your products. You don't want people who use your cannabis to be ingesting harmful chemicals. But also there are various regulations in many states, including Colorado, Washington, and Oregon, where Natureside is approved for pesticide use in those states. You don't want to run afoul of regulations. You want to be regulatory compliant, and you can be with NatureSideCannabis.com. Check them out. They'll also let you know how to be regulatory compliant, what you need to do, the products you need. They have expertise. They're a proud sponsor of the Marijuana Times show. Perhaps the most important reason of all to go check them out. NatureSideCannabis.com. Side is spelled C-I-D-E. Go check them out. Great sponsor of the show. This first story, as mentioned, so marijuanatimes.org. Story I wrote over there. Will high marijuana taxes in California keep the black market alive? Now, many of you, if you're on Instagram or Twitter or various other social media outlets, you may have seen already that people have been posting pictures of their receipts. They buy recreational products, adult use products in California, and they're posting receipts from their purchases to show how high the taxes are. And in some places, they're 28, for recreational marijuana, they're 28 upwards to 40%. This article I wrote is basically a follow-up to one I wrote in November. It makes the same points. Obviously, the higher the taxes, the higher the price of the cannabis. The higher the price of the cannabis, the less able legal retailers are able to compete with black market illegal dealers. So to undercut the black market, which is one of the many positives when it comes to marijuana legalization, is the undercutting of the black market and the violence associated with the black market. It's hard to do if you keep prices inflated because of taxes. Now, I understand, one of the big selling points is taxes, and California is a high tax state. They have the highest income tax in the country. They have the highest sales tax in the country. So California is going to have high taxes on cannabis. And I quote a psychiatry professor at Stanford University who studies marijuana policy. He said, "I hope the state holds its nerve because this problem, even if it is a problem, will correct itself." Well, I would say it is a problem. If people are paying more, much more, sometimes upwards of 40% more than they would normally pay in a zero tax situation. But even if they're paying 40%, even 30%, even 20% would be a great relief. But this guy says, well, it may not be a problem. But he thinks it's going to correct itself. In other words, he feels like the natural price decline that's going to happen in the cannabis industry, which is we already seen in places like Washington and Colorado, there's been massive price drops. There's been massive price drop in California even before recreational legalization. So it's going to happen for obvious reasons. You increase legal supply, you drop the price, If the supply is increased relative to demand, you drop the price. A lot of the risk that's associated with being an illegal dealer that inflates the price and makes prohibition prices high, that's not associated, obviously, with the legal market. Many reasons that the price is going to come down. So this guy's saying basically let it come down on its own. Don't lower the taxes. And since many of these taxes are percentages, total amount that's added to the price will also come down. Like the example I use, if you buy $100 worth of recreational marijuana in California or a $100 product, and there's a 15% excise tax, that's a $15 purchase. That's $15 in taxes from that excise tax. If it's only $75, if the price comes down, then it's only $11.25 for the excise tax. So the guy has a point that the natural price drop is going to bring prices down anyway, and that will cause more people to come into the industry, and that will probably, in the end, raise more tax revenue because more people are leaving the black market and going to the legal market to buy their cannabis and their cannabis-related products. But right now, I mean, there's the various reactions on social media. Some people are like, oh, this is great. I don't care how much the taxes are. We're getting to buy, recreational cannabis just without a medical recommendation here in California. That's fantastic. Some people are like, this is nuts. I'm going to go back to my dealer, my legal dealer, because his prices are lower. There's a lot of different reactions, and it remains to be seen what kind of effect all this has on the black market in California. Excuse me. But personally, and I think a lot of people agree with me, that taxes need to be lower. That'll accelerate the process of the undercutting of the black market if taxes are lower. But as I said, it's in California, that's just not going to happen. So if you're waiting for that, California people, if you're waiting for them to lower taxes on your marijuana, your illegal marijuana, well, don't hold your breath, or you will pass out. You will turn blue and pass out while you're waiting. This next story. I don't know why I'm laughing about that. You'd be dead. Well, you wouldn't be dead. You'd fall. You wake up. So maybe that's why I'm laughing. Because you're holding your breath waiting for taxes. It is kind of a funny thing. You're waiting for taxes to come down. This next story is from entrepreneur.com, and the infographic that they use, the story is called The Business of Cannabis infographic. The infographic they use is from businessstudent.com. Now, all these numbers come from the infographic from businessstudent.com. At the end of the infographic, at the bottom of the infographic, they have like 12 to 15 links listed where they get all these numbers, the sources. It's like New Frontier and a lot of different places that we've talked about on this show that gauge the marijuana market where it is currently and also gauge where they think it's going to be, in this case for this infographic, in 2025. Anyway, the Business of Cannabis infographic, with all that's happening in the cannabis industry, it's a sure sign that right now is a good time to hop on board. In 2017 alone, the marijuana industry, both recreational and medicinal, reached $7.9 billion. And that's just with the fraction of the country being legal. That doesn't include California's recreational market, which is just getting started and just started in many places a few weeks ago. So all of these things are for the success that it's had already is incredible. It's not surprising because we know that there's a huge demand for cannabis. There's a built-in demand for it. And there are millions of people who are ready to jump in. They want to buy legal marijuana. They're just waiting for it to be legal. Now, this infographic has a lot of different numbers and all that. We're not going to get into all of them. I'm going to focus on two for our purposes here. The first one you see there, if you have us, if you're watching the video, the legal cannabis market right now, the medical market is $5.3 billion and the recreational market is $2.6 billion. That gets you to the $7.9 billion. That is the estimated market at this point in total. By 2025, they're estimating the medical market will be $13.2 billion and the recreational market will be $10.9 billion. What's interesting about this, and we'll get to the economic benefits you can see there in a minute. What's interesting about this is that they're projecting that the medical market, even 8 years from now, will continue to be more than a recreational market. Now, eventually, at some point, that's not going to be true anymore. The recreational market at some point will eclipse the medical market for obvious reasons. The medical market, now the medical market right now has the advantage, obviously, of being in many more states and be allowed in many more states. But if you, other things being equal, if you have a group of people to pull customers from that have to have a medical recommendation for marijuana, and you compare that to a group of consumers to pull from that is just everybody who's over 21 years of age, who's 21 or older, obviously the potential demand for the recreational market is much more than the medical market. So at some point that recreational market number will eclipse, the recreational market will eclipse the medical market. You see economic benefits of $745 million in 2017. They're estimating that will be $2.3 billion by 2020. Some estimate if medical cannabis were available nationally, taxpayers would save $220 million in Medicare expenses. All very interesting stuff. Now, this next graphic, this next part of the infographic, again, you can find this, all of our stories I talk about are linked in the description of the video. This next graphic shows you a bit why medical marijuana continues to dominate over recreational marijuana. Excuse me again. According to data, medical marijuana customers shopped every 10 days, while recreational marijuana customers shopped every 14 days. The medical marijuana customers spent on average $136 per transaction, while recreational customers only spent $49 on average per transaction. Now, again, like I said, a lot of this has to do with the fact that the medical marijuana market in many states is more advanced, it's more mature. There's just a lot more supply right now when it comes to medical marijuana versus recreational marijuana. It's available in more places in the country. And obviously medical marijuana customers are spending more, they're going more often. Again, that has to do with a lot of supply. Also has to do with medical marijuana customers need certain standards when it comes to their medicine. You know, they need, whether it's like they have to have edibles, they can't smoke, or they have to have vaporizers, whatever. Many things come together to combine to cause them to spend more per transaction. They have a higher standard of what they need. You know, someone who's just adult use and is not using it for medicine at all, then go and just buy a joint, you know, for the cocktail party night or whatever, and they're fine. But medical marijuana users and consumers, they have a certain level that they need, which is going to cause them to consume more often and more per transaction. Who are cannabis consumers? You see there, they break it down by age. Those 21 to 35 are 41% of cannabis consumers, which is not surprising. Younger people are more apt to not believe the stigma and know that the stigma that surrounds cannabis is wrong, so they're more likely to use cannabis. 26% of consumers are between 36 and 45. When you get to 46 to 55, that's 16% of consumers. 56 and older is 17% of consumers. And that number, you may have seen many stories on marijuanatimes.org. I've written stories about it. That number is the one that's growing the fastest. Those over 56 or 60 or 65, however you want to put it. Older people, senior citizens, are the fastest growing demographic when it comes to new cannabis users. Again, the reasons for that are obvious. They were raised on the stigma of cannabis. They were told to stay away from it. They were given a bunch of fear-mongering stories that weren't true about cannabis. And now they're older. They have more aches and pains. They have more reason to use cannabis. And because of the internet, they can find out that, well, a lot of that stuff I was told as a kid, well, that's just not true. It doesn't cause cancer. It doesn't kill brain cells. It's not going to lead me down the road to a life of deprivation and degeneracy and living in a gutter and shooting heroin in my arm through a crack pipe. None of that's going to happen. And, you know, I got arthritis. I'm feeling bad. I smoke a joint. I feel better. So older people are definitely the fastest growing demographic because, well, all the reasons I just gave. And good for them. You break it down by gender. According to these numbers, 53% of marijuana smokers are male and 47% are female. I think in the past that number tended to be a little higher male-wise on the male end of the spectrum. But as you can see, according to these numbers, you know, it's getting closer to 50-50. You want to see this infographic, as I said, click the link in the description of this video. There's a ton of other numbers they go through, but I thought those two sections that I showed you here on the video were the most important and the most Interesting. And the infographic people apparently thought that as well, because those are the first two frames, if you will. I don't know how infographics are divided up. I'm not that tech savvy. I'm not an infographic guy. I want to say frames. The first two sections may be better. The first two sections was what I talked about. So we're in agreement that those were the most important. Last but certainly not least, this is a story from Leafly.com. America mourns passing of Dennis Peron, father of medical marijuana. Many of you in the medical marijuana community and the cannabis community as a whole, of course, know who Dennis was. It was confirmed last week, the passing of Dennis at 72. Is Leafly described him the legendary cannabis activist who kindled America's medical marijuana revolution in the 1980s. Peron's brother Jeffrey posted on Facebook on that day. It says, quote, "It is with a heavy heart that I announced the passing of my brother Dennis Peron, a man that changed the world." For those of you who don't know about Dennis or what he did, Leafly wrote a long story, again, linked in the description, about him, but I'll just read a little bit here for those of you, again, who don't know about his background and how instrumental he was with California's medical marijuana program. Quote, "As a leading figure," again, this is from Leafly, "as a leading figure in San Francisco's gay culture and cannabis underground in the 1970s and 1980s, Peron was one of the first to realize the health benefits of cannabis offered to those battling AIDS in the heart of the crisis that overtook the city in the late 1980s. Working with other local leaders like Mary J. Rathbun, Brownie Mary, and Dr. Donald Abrams, Peron helped pass an ordinance legalizing medical cannabis in the city of San Francisco, then took the movement statewide with the 1996 passage of Proposition 215, the nation's first statewide medical marijuana legalization law. So, of course, California legalized medical marijuana, the first state to do so in 1996. Dennis Peron was instrumental in getting that passed. Peron and his husband, John Entwistle, continue to be active in the life of San Francisco over the past 30 years. Until recently, their bed and breakfast, Castro Castle, on the edge of the city's famous gay neighborhood, welcomed all travelers with day-glow decorated rooms that allow visitors to enjoy an authentic taste of the city's psychedelic culture. A painted mural on a garden wall memorialized Harvey Milk, the late San Francisco city supervisor who counted Peron as a close friend and an early political supporter. Again, like I said, it's a great long story over at Leafly about Dennis and his life. But the medical marijuana community is obviously indebted. The marijuana community, period, is indebted to Dennis because there always has to be people who come first. There has to be the pioneers. Without the pioneers, nothing happens. Without the people who are willing to stand up and say, this is wrong, at a time when it was really unpopular to say. The 1980s and 1990s were not a time where you stood up and said, hey, marijuana's good, prohibition's bad, we should legalize marijuana. Because most people disagreed with you. Polls back then will show percent support for legalization in the 20% range. In the 20s, lower than 30%. And medical marijuana, most people had no idea. In 1996, when you said medical marijuana, most people looked at you like you were an idiot. It was like saying medical heroin or medical Jack Daniels. It just didn't exist. But Dennis was one of the first people to stand up and say, it does exist, it's helping all these people. And he's right. And that's one of the more important parts of his story is that he's absolutely right. Medical marijuana is good. It is helping a lot of people, probably even more to the extent that he ever imagined. I'm sure even in 1996, he didn't know all the things that marijuana could do because there really weren't a lot of studies about it. He knew some of the stuff that it could do. We've learned much more since then. But he had the guts to stand up and say, prohibition is not helpful. These people are sick. They need medical marijuana. It's going to help them. They are not criminals. So thank you, Dennis, for being a pioneer. Because as I said, there has to be pioneers or nothing gets done. And we wouldn't be where we are, more than likely, when it comes to the cannabis community and marijuana law reform, if it wasn't for Dennis. So thank you to him. And if you don't know enough about him, go, Google Dennis Peron, Peron, and learn more. Better late than never. But most people in the cannabis community have heard the name because that's just how legendary the guy is and how important he was to the movement. Thanks everybody for checking us out. It's the first show of the week. Got a long week ahead of us. We got a long year ahead of us. We got a lot of stuff going on in 2018 with this show, with the marijuana law reform movement, with marijuanatimes.org. So make sure you check it all out. Thank you to naturesidecannabis.com, a proud sponsor of the show. Organic, all natural pesticides, naturesidecannabis.com. If you would like to sponsor the show, email us at info@marijuanatimes.org and let us know that you'd like to do so. Thanks, everybody. I'm Joe Klare. This has been the Marijuana Times Show. We'll see you next time.